Welcome to the Clear Ground Show. I'm your host, Dr. G, with a PhD. Before we get started, remember guys, tell your friends about this show, and please like and subscribe on this episode. It really helps with the YouTube algorithms. If you like the thumbnail art, you can check it out on a much higher resolution on Instagram. And remember, leave any questions you might have throughout the week. And on the last episode of the week, I will be answering the questions in a mailbag. We've got a lot to talk about today, guys. So we're going to start off with YouTube not liking our content. So what else is new? They did give us a warning, and I'll discuss that and describe what happened and the actions we took. After that, we're going to get into a bunch of COVID stuff. Pretty exciting stuff coming up. So we're going to talk about some studies. We're going to go over some different countries and their responses to COVID, some U.S. companies and their response to the new COVID lightening up of mandates. Then we'll talk about an operation that was done in the U.S., the first of its kind, and that was they transplanted a pig heart into a human. So we'll see how he's doing. We'll talk a little bit about climate change in the end and some models and some scientific humility. All that and much, much more. Let's dive on in. So first of all, I want to congratulate everybody that listens to this show. You guys made this news possible. We broke 100 hours in terms of watch time, and that's all you guys. So it took 24 episodes, just 24, and we broke over 100 hours of view time. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for subscribing. Please keep telling your friends. This is really great news. We also have a little bit of bad news. YouTube put a warning on this channel. So remember, we evaded warning last time by appealing, and it turns out that that process totally worked. And remember last time, it was the fact that I was actually playing a clip from Rachel Maddow talking about vaccines incorrectly, and I was correcting her. And we got, the algorithm caught us, and we had to do an appeal, and it worked out because I was explaining why she was wrong. Well, this time it didn't work out so well for us. So on Monday night at around 11 p.m., I posted the 25th episode of the Clear Ground Show, which is a great, great landmark for the show. Unfortunately, by 4 a.m., YouTube algorithm had flagged it and they pulled it down. The reason for pulling it down, according to them, was under their medical misinformation category. Again, as with the last time, it was unclear as to what part of the video was actually the misinformation. And so like last time, I kind of had to guess. My guess is that it has to do with me explaining the VAERS system, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System from the CDC. It's a CDC website, and I was explaining the nuance behind it and why it could be useful, but also what it doesn't mean. And I guess in explaining that nuance, which is important to understand, especially because that's an official tool that we use, they just said, nope, that's misinformation. That's my guess. Again, I have no idea what actually was the cause, but that's my intuition. So basically, I took that video and I actually made a Rumble account, and I've uploaded that video to Rumble. It's the Clear Ground Show episode 25, and it's titled Coaxing COVID Policy. So if you guys want to go check it out and see for yourselves what might have been considered medical misinformation by the YouTube guys, go and check it out and let me know what you think. Remember, all sources are cited in the description, so you can see every single source, where it comes from, and ultimately that way you can make up your own opinions on it. So please guys, go check it out. I am so sure that this warning is going to really hurt the algorithms on YouTube, so we'll see if we get many more new subscribers. In that vein, continue to tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. Let's get more reasonable conversation out there. And now let's get to some news. I'm going to start off with this clip from Don Lemon from CNN, one of our favorite shows that we talk about on this show. And this clip I'm going to play because it partially refers or is referring to a topic that I discussed pretty heavily in episode 25. And also it's just one of the most perfect displays of why so much credibility has been lost. Let's take a listen.
We have to start doing things for the greater good of society, and not for idiots who think that they can do their own research or that they are above the law and they can break the rules. Australia, Novak Djokovic, Australia said, no. We're going to look at the greater good of everyone in our society, and you're not part of that.
So keep in mind, first of all, when he's referring to idiots, he's referring to people like you and me, people that go out, look things up for ourselves, try and figure it out. We take into account many points of view, including his. We take it into account, and then we make assessments. He's talking about us when he says idiots. Secondly, he is, as per his usual situation, wrong about Australia, wrong about Novak. I think I guess on a surface level, he may be correct that that's the reason that they gave for talking about Novak and getting him out of Australia. But I suspect that in the coming weeks, we're going to find out that Novak was right. They're going to really regret it, both economically, their population is going to be upset, the tennis world's going to be upset. I think it's a total mistake, and Don Lemon is celebrating that as a victory. It is not a victory. It is not a victory. So we will today, in fact, be celebrating several victories in terms of COVID milestones. So first, let's start off with the Brussels Times. So the Brussels Times released an article today, Wednesday, January 19th, 2022, and the title of that article was that Moderna was no longer used to vaccinate people under the age of 31. So in the opening paragraph, they give the reason for this, and basically it's because of myocarditis and pericarditis. Now let's go look at the study that they got this information from. So here's the title of the study, and it was published in the BMJ on December 16th of 2021. Title is SARS-CoV-2 Vaccination and Myocarditis or Myopericarditis Population-Based Cohort Study. We've got a lot of things to cover today, so we're only going to briefly touch on this subject, but remember it's in the description, so go check it out if you want to read more. So the conclusion that this paper came to was that vaccination with mRNA 1273, which is Moderna, was associated with a significantly increased risk of myocarditis or myopericarditis in the Danish population, primarily driven by an increased risk among individuals aged 12 to 39 years old, while the Pfizer vaccine was only associated with a significantly increased risk among women. However, the absolute rate of myocarditis or myopericarditis after SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccination was low, even in the younger age groups. The benefits of SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccination should be taken into account when interpreting these findings. Larger multinational studies are needed to further investigate the risks of myocarditis or myopericarditis after vaccination within smaller subgroups. Now, here's one of the telling figures in the paper, and this figure shows basically mRNA from Moderna, that vaccine, and the mRNA vaccine from Pfizer. The Pfizer one's the yellow dotted line, mRNA is the purple line. Now, on the y-axis, you have the cumulative incidences per 100,000 of vaccinated individuals. So as you can see, after the first dose, it looked like Pfizer was a little bit higher than Moderna, but basically the exact same. Then if you look at the second dose, Moderna just shoots up. So this study falls in line with many other studies. Remember, we discussed it back in November when countries like Iceland and other Scandinavian countries stopped giving Moderna to their youth, men under the age of 30 specifically. So this paper falls in line with that, and they discuss needing more multinational studies, and I agree it's always good to replicate and get more studies, but this is confirming other multinational studies. Dovetailing with that sentiment, this comes from CNBC. The WHO says there's no evidence healthy children and adolescents need COVID boosters. One could argue there's a lot of things that have no evidence that we've done lately, but I'll digress. So going on to the article, there's, quote, no evidence right now, end quote, that suggests healthy children and adolescents need booster shots to supplement their COVID-19 vaccinations, World Health Organization Chief Scientist Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, sorry I mispronounced that, said Tuesday. She continues, the aim is to protect the most vulnerable, to protect those at highest risk of severe disease and dying. Those are our elderly population, immunocompromised with underlying conditions, and also healthcare workers. So what myself and many others have been saying for well over a year now, and what I've been saying since this show's conception on the internet in November, thank you for agreeing with us, WHO, finally. Another doctor, Dr. Michael Ryan, said this, I think people do have a certain fear that this booster thing is going to be like every 2 or 3 months, and everyone's going to have to go and get a booster, and I don't think we have the answer to that yet. It's not just that people have a fear of this, Dr. Ryan, it's happening. So for example, many countries just like Israel, Germany, Austria, people are actually forcing boosters. There is no metric for when or when not to be boosted. Furthermore, studies are coming out of Israel saying that the 3rd and 4th boosters aren't enough to protect from Omicron. So it's a compounding problem of the product isn't giving the results you want, and people don't trust your decision-making process. There's also the often overlooked fact by many of these super high-level individuals that everybody has common sense and prudence. People can look at their own situations, they can decide what's best for themselves. That factor is missing from a lot of these leaders right now. Ryan continues saying scientists may eventually redefine how many doses are required in the primary series of COVID shots, while most healthy people may need just 2 shots. He said the elderly or the immunocompromised may need 3 or 4. So these comments from the WHO come roughly 2 weeks after the US CDC approved booster shots for adolescents aged 12 to 17 amid the current surge in coronavirus cases due to the highly contagious Omicron variant. I said it last week, and I'm going to say it again. Things are going to start turning around really, really, really fast. And real quick note, before it starts happening, I want to get ahead of it and just make the call right now. My guess is that this is an election year in the U.S., and so many governorships are up for re-election. If you're a governor in a state, it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. If you, and we're going to hear this, if you run on policies that are just going to end mask mandates, end vaccine mandates, you are going to do very well. At the very least, you're going to be competitive. I think we're going to see a lot of governors or potential runners for governors start saying these things, so just look out for that. You heard it first here. Speaking of things turning on real quick, this article is from Reuters. We have a few from Reuters today, but this is from Reuters, and if this article had come out in the fall this year, it would have been silenced. Many people in the fall this year were silenced for saying what this article is about to say. So the title of the article is, Prior COVID infection More Protective Than Vaccination During Delta Surge, U.S. Study Finds. People who had previously been infected with COVID-19 were better protected against the Delta variant than those who were vaccinated alone, suggesting that natural immunity was a more potent shield than vaccines against that variant. California and New York health officials reported this on Wednesday. This is amazing because we might get another strike just for doing this, but this is coming from Reuters, so let's keep going. Protection against Delta was highest, however, among people who were both vaccinated and had survived a previous COVID infection, and lowest among those who had never been infected or vaccinated, the study found. The article goes on, nevertheless, vaccination remains the safest strategy against COVID-19, according to the report published in the US CDC Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. The results do not apply to the Omicron variant of the virus, which now accounts for 99.5% of COVID cases in the US. I wonder how true that is, because remember, it jumped from 20% to 80 or 70%, back down to 30%. So maybe it is that high now. I'm not sure. Here's a quote. The evidence of this report does not change our vaccination recommendations, said Dr. Ben Silk of the CDC. So my only comment to that comment by Dr. Silk would be, shouldn't it at least nuance your vaccine recommendations? Shouldn't it open the door to say, hey, look, you've been infected previously. We're seeing that there is some immunity. It's decently robust immunity from previous infection to new variants. So let's discuss. Maybe vaccines are right for you. Maybe they're not right for you. Maybe, everyone's a different case. And I think this evidence adds to a more nuanced response instead of the exact same response. I think where a lot of people are losing faith in the medical field is that it's sort of been diluted, at least in regards to COVID. It's been diluted into a sort of mass response. Everyone's the exact same. Everyone gets the exact same treatment. And that's not working for people. I think, medicine really, even with COVID, needs to go back to patient by patient. Everyone's different. Let's look at your situation. Let's assess. Let's move from there. One more quote from Dr. Silk that I forgot to mention. He said at the end of that, we know that vaccination is still the safest way to protect yourself against COVID-19. I'll just finish out with a few more quotes from this doctor, and it's about the study. So before the Delta variant, COVID-19 vaccination resulted in better protection against a subsequent infection than surviving a previous infection. However, in the summer and fall of 2021, Delta became the predominant circulating iteration of the virus in the U.S., and surviving a previous infection now provided a greater protection against a subsequent infection than vaccination. So we're getting more and more hard numbers that acquired immunity is also effective. Now let's go check out a few countries around the world. We're going to start with a not good COVID story, and then we're going to end with quite a few great COVID stories. So first, the not good COVID story. Let's go to America's Hat, Canada.
Au vaccin, vous autres?
Oui, tous les deux, on a une seule dose.
Ah oui? Puis est-ce que vous êtes d'accord, vous autres, avec la vaccination obligatoire?
Oui.
Oui?
Oh.
Ah oui, hein?
Wow.
On dirait que je les ai drillés, Julie.
Oui. Puis qu'est-ce qu'on devrait faire avec les gens qui ne veulent pas se faire vacciner?
On devrait appeler la police.
Ouh,
Oui.
oui.
S'ils n'ont pas leur vaccin, ça peut mettre beaucoup de personnes en danger. Fait que comme le gouvernement est en train de faire en ce moment, il faut leur couper petite chose à petite jusqu'à temps qu'ils se donnent et qu'ils se fassent vacciner.
En tout cas, on a des futurs politiciens à côté de nous. Merci. Merci beaucoup à tous nos invités.
So that was extremely disturbing, watching kids advocate for basically police state in Canada to enforce these vaccines. Almost as disturbing is the dude with the man bun, the big mustache, the John Lennon glasses, leather jacket, clapping at these kids doing this. That is just the epitome of Canada right now. But in all seriousness, it is really scary that what these kids have learned in the last 2 years is that the way to get people to do what they want is to force them by taking away their rights little by little until they comply. That is just a really terrifying future prospect for children. And when this lady says you guys should become politicians, I see that in your future, that's a terrifying sign. It should be a huge wake-up call to all Quebecians and Canadians in general. This is what your children are learning. Do you want a society in the next few years of people who think that the best way to get what they want is to force other people to agree with them by whittling away their rights? I don't think so. And one more story out of Canada that's both hilarious and sad. This comes from CNN. A Canadian restaurant had to close its dining room because it accepted dog photos in lieu of proof of vaccination negative COVID tests. So a restaurant in Alberta was forced to briefly close its dining room after the health department found patrons were showing photos of dogs instead of proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test as mandated by the Canadian province. The Alberta Health Service ordered the Granary Kitchen in Red Deer to temporarily close last Friday after the department received a complaint and launched an investigation January 11th. During the investigation, the health department sent two test shoppers at different times, and both were able to enter and dine in after showing a photo of a dog and personal identification in lieu of meeting requirements, the health agency said. So this is an amazing story, and first of all, kudos to that company. They're just trying to stay open. It's hard out there. It's got to be so hard when you're forced to comply with all these regulations and people are scared to go out. Your margins that are already normally quite tight must be insanely tight. Second of all, who's the snitch? Who's the person that went in and was like, oh, wait, you know what? I'm enjoying my meal. Now let me tell the health authorities that these guys are allowing people in that are showing pictures of their dogs. Who's the party pooper? This story is funny and sad because of the fact that it's true. It's true. That it's just crazy to me. Now on to some good COVID news. Let's hear it from the horse's mouth, Boris Johnson.
We can return to Plan A in England and allow Plan B regulations to expire. As a result, from the start of Thursday next week, mandatory certification will end. Organisations can, of course, choose to use the NHS COVID pass voluntarily, but we will end the compulsory use of COVID status certification in England. From now on, the government is no longer asking people to work from home. And people should now speak to their employers about arrangements for returning to the office. And having looked at the data carefully, the Cabinet concluded that once regulations lapse, the government will no longer mandate the wearing of face masks anywhere. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, from tomorrow we will no longer require face masks in classrooms, and the Department for Education will shortly remove national guidance.
This is fantastic news, but we should be weary. We should not soon forget how this all happened and the series of events that led to it, the actual situation, and now coming out of it. We shouldn't lose scope of that, but we should at the same time be very happy. This is an exciting news. This is a great win. And I think all of this takes place or starts to take place next Monday, January 24th in the UK. And the UK is not alone. Scotland is going to lift most of its remaining COVID restrictions. The new Czech government is scrapping their mandatory COVID-19 vaccination. And here in the US, Starbucks suspends their vaccine and testing requirements after the US court ruling. This is especially big news, seeing as the coffee giant earlier this month said it would require its around 220,000 U.S. employees to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or undergo weekly testing. So that was just earlier this month. Other big companies like General Electric are following suit as well, and I think we're going to see many more follow suit. Now the only group left really is hospitals and these CMS workers, but it's coming. I think it's coming for them too, and I think it's coming soon. So these are all big COVID wins, and I expect quite a few more to come in the next few weeks and the next few months. Now let's turn to two non-COVID related stories. So this first story, U.S. surgeons transplant a pig heart into a human in world's first operation. This dying Maryland handyman, who was 57, who was ineligible for human organs, is doing well 3 days after the risky last-ditch procedure. So Mr. Bennett, who's 57, is breathing on his own while still connected to a machine that helps his new heart pump blood around his body. Experts say it's too soon to know if his body will fully accept the organ, and the next few weeks will be critical as he is weaned off the machine. But if successful, it would mark a medical breakthrough and could save thousands of lives in the U.S. alone each year. Doctors called the procedure a watershed event. Obviously, there's lots of room for complications in a normal transplant. So that means human to human, a human liver to a human liver. There's so many more variables with a pig heart going into a human heart. It's hard to even comprehend the amount of possible things that can go wrong. That being said, it seems like so far it went okay. This graphic here is showing briefly how they kind of changed a pig heart to make it easier to accept in the human body, which is very important. Organ rejection is basically fatal. You do not want that to happen. So this is very interesting, very breaking stuff, also controversial. The man in question has a violent criminal record, and he was involved in a serious assault 35 years ago, and that's the cause for lots of consternation in these groups. So, that's a very medically ethical question, how do we test these new treatments? Who are the guinea pigs? All these questions come into effect, and this is happening now. In other news, scientists discover a surprising cause of Europe's Little Ice Age in the late medieval era. So following an era known as the medieval warm period, temperatures in Europe in the early 15th century fell sharply and what has become known as the Little Ice Age. This remarkable cold period brought increased glaciation in mountains, expansion of some areas of sea ice, crop failures, famines, and disease across Europe. Undependable summers were followed by harsh winters, during which rivers and canals routinely froze over. In the UK, the first River Thames Frost Fair was held in 1608 and was an almost annual occurrence until the last one in 1814. This little ice age was not believed to have been due to a global period of glaciation, but its exact cause has remained uncertain. There are numerous explanations, including heightened levels of volcanic activity, reduced solar activity, the impact of the Black Death reducing the human population, and the impact of European disease on South American populations, which in turn affected deforestation and reforestation rates. But, and here's the kicker, scientists at the University of Massachusetts now believe they have found a new key factor in why temperatures plunged to their coldest in 10,000 years. Surprisingly, the cooling appears to have been triggered by an unusually warm episode, the researchers said. Now, the article goes on quite some time about these different implications of this finding, but one of the things they said is that it's a well-recognized process, this AMOC process, and it's like a planetary conveyor belt, and it transfers warm water from the tropics to the Arctic. So that is followed up towards the end by this quote: "Climate models do not capture these events reliably, and so we may be underestimating future ice loss from the ice sheet, with more fresh water entering the North Atlantic, potentially leading to a weakening or collapse of the AMOC." Why is this important? Because before we start on the next craze of science hype for climate change or for COVID vaccination or any of these things, it's important to remember what a model is. We make the models, right? Our understanding of the world, we make these parameters, we put them into a model, we play the model a million times, it comes up with different variations, different curves, we predict from that. We don't know everything. Our models are very incomplete. And so the best part about science is the reasonable discussion that can happen between competing ideas and showing different evidence and contradicting things. These are all different ways of finding more material truth, which is what science is good at doing. We just need to keep at the forefront a humility about ourselves and a humility about the process, because we just don't know so many things. And so I think the best way to go about acting on this humility is reasonable discussion and reasonable debate. I tried to provide that here, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And with that, we'll wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for listening. Please enjoy this video, and I'll catch you guys again on Friday.
It is Veterans Day, and we know that the service that the men and women of our armed
He
forces
stole his
do
Oscar
for this
code.
country, I don't know if we can ever repay it. That's why